Okay, it's recording.
Okay. Are we echoing? No?
You're
No.
not. No.
Great.
That's why I said it's usually you have to go all the way out and come back in.
That was bad. Cindy was talking between echoes.
I know, and we couldn't hear her on the echo.
Evelyn's had a lot of trouble with hers, and she doesn't mute herself, and that's why I get after her, because I've told her, you know, and I'm not picking on her. Well, yeah, I am. But yeah, see, who have we lost? Evelyn's one. She probably can't get back in. I told her last night she had to reboot and reload everything. Oh, Kathy's not here. Cindy, Diane, Evelyn's not here. Jerry, is Jerry here? Janet. Oh yeah, hi Janet, there you are. Jerry, Janet, Julie, Julie's here. Karen Miller, Karen Ursula.
Yeah, Karen Ursula's here.
Yeah, she's here. Karen, what happened to you yesterday? Catherine Hayes. Kelly was here. There's Kelly. Hi, Kelly, by the way.
Hi.
How you doing, hon?
Good, thank you.
Laurel didn't make it back in. Sharon hasn't made it back in. Stephanie. All right, well, they'll join.
They may have some sort of technical issue that they can't get back in. Who
Well,
knows?
Sharon left before we went in and out. She left the meeting. I think because of the technical difficulties.
Okay. Oh, we're going to go back to class somehow. There we go. Optimize. There we go. Oh, I haven't got back in. Oh, well. Well, I do want to get back in. Well, it's the only way I can keep. Keep track of you guys. There's somebody coming in. No? Okay. Well, I can find everything but. There it is. And then the flood came. There was no conditions on it, okay? Get back to where we were. We did all that, right? Was there anything else that you picked up on Noah that was interesting to you?
Go back one screen.
I forgot that, didn't I? What was interesting, look at this, how that was divided. Shem is the one that became, the promise came through, right? Because he was the one from Abraham. But look how
Denise, this is what I was going to talk about, because I did a little side study of this.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, discovered all the things that Ham's people did. I didn't go too much into Jacob, but Shem and Ham were the ones that I really looked at. And you can tell by looking at Shem that he is the promised person with Jesus in it. Abram.
Our echo back.
Denise, it started meeting. When you joined the, that's when it started.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I left the meeting. How about that? Is that better? So it was me? Is that what you're saying? Okay, it was me. I find it interesting if you look over at Ann, you got Cush, Put, Canaan, and Nimrod. You know, that was all bad. Over here you got Gomer and Magog. Isn't that interesting to see all that? And then Noah, you know, I guess just stayed in China. Isn't that interesting? I found that, yeah. The ark came to rest on Mount Ararat, and some say that that's in Turkey. I talked to a gentleman, oh, what's his name? Randall Pierce, who went over to Turkey to try to find it. Of course, he's now blacklisted. They won't let him back in Turkey because they don't want them to find anything Christian in Turkey. But it was really interesting, him going and saying he's pretty much convinced that the mountain is in Turkey. It's kind of funny to talk to people like that. But we'll move along.
The way it's Chinese?
Yeah,
Oh.
that's what some people say. Then we go to Genesis 15. This is day 2 of our homework. What did you learn about God and Abram? Because right now he's Abram, right? So in just kind of, who was the covenant? Well, the covenant was between God and Abram. What did you learn about this covenant? Who initiated? What was it about? What was the same about this covenant and Noah's covenant?
It was everlasting.
It was everlasting, yeah. Who initiated the covenant?
It was also unconditional.
Yes.
It was initiated by God.
Mm-hmm. God thought he was a righteous, or called him a righteous man, did he not? What did the Lord promise Abram?
That his descendants would be as numerous as the sands of the sea.
Numerous as the stars. Yeah, okay. Abram asked how he would know that they would possess alone, and it seems the covenant was the Lord's answer to him. I find that that's kind of weird, isn't it? Where it says, you know, Abram says, well, how do I know? And he goes, because it's going to happen. I said so, right? Look at, that was interesting. Wait, if you look at 15, and you look at 8 and 16. Let's see, 8 is, he said, O Lord God, how may I know that I will possess it? And he says, so bring me a 3-year-old heifer, and, you know, and then says, and then he makes the covenant with him. And in 16 it says, then in the 4th generation they were returned here, for the iniquity of the Amorite is not complete. I'm telling you, when you study Genesis, this gets really interesting. But he says, you're not going to see it in your lifetime. It's going to be 400 years before I bring the people into the land. Okay? That's what's interesting about this covenant. But what made Abram so special?
He believed regardless. It didn't matter. He just was a righteous man, and he believed no matter what.
Yeah.
Without much reason. I mean, he was like the first. It's like he believed out of thin air.
Just believe because God said so. Because it was how many years? Does anybody recall? I don't recall right offhand. How many years was it before Isaac was born?
10.
Was it 10? I thought it was like 25. Was it just 10? Anyway, it was a lot. but they cut the covenant. And this is where you get into the gore and stuff. And God walked in between there. What does walking or cutting the covenant mean in your research that you did?
That it can't be undone.
Yeah, with God, it's a done deal. It's as if it was already done. And it will not be undone with God. Abram fell into a deep sleep, and the Lord told him his descendants would be enslaved for 400 years in a land that was not theirs. He would judge that nation which oppressed them. Then in the fourth generation, the Lord said they would return to the land. So he knows it's not going to happen in his lifetime, but he still believed. And when the sun had set, a smoking oven and a flaming torch passed between the pieces of the animal which Abram had cut. So when you made a covenant, what did you learn through your definitions what that entails? What does it mean?
The man had to take action.
That man had to take action?
He had to cut the animal.
Well, yeah. They were pretty much like cutting a deal, weren't they?
It involves cutting flesh,
And spilling what?
blood.
Why is blood so important?
Because blood is the cause of life.
Yeah. If you notice, I find it so freakish that every horror story or every, murder story or something is always about the blood, isn't it?
Yes.
Isn't that kind of weird? Even in the world.
Well, if you think about it, it's, even in, it's always life and will forever be life.
Life
So,
is in the blood, right?
mhm.
That's some chat going on. I don't know why there's I'm not hearing any reverbs. In Genesis 17, we move on, and Abram is 99 years old. He was 75, I think, wasn't he, in 15? I think he was. But Abram's 99 years old, and some of the 15 promises was restated. What happened in chapter 17 of Genesis that was important? What did God do?
He changed the names.
Yes, he changed it. He changed Abram to Abraham, father of the multitude of nations. And he changed Sarai, which meant princess, to Sarah, mother of nations. Kings would come from her. That's something, isn't it? What else happened? Here there had to be promises made on both sides. What were they? What was the big thing here?
He instituted the practice of circumcision.
Yeah. One is circumcision. Sorry, Paul, if we're going to embarrass you here, but it is what it is. One is done to the males.
The instrument is cut. I don't know any other way to put it, without getting gross.
Yes, well, the excess, what do you call it again?
Foreskin.
Foreskin, yeah, is cut away, and it is a sign of covenant, correct? It's done on the 8th day. When we get into Genesis, we really get into, why 8th day is important and everything. The land of Canaan is again mentioned as their everlasting possession. There's promises connected with this. The promise of Isaac would be the covenant promise. Now, during this time, if you don't know this, you've got to take Genesis in for sure. But, you know, Sarah comes up with this great idea. Well, I can't have kids, so I'm going to give him Hagar and, you know, have her have a son for us. And they have a son, Ishmael, right? Ishmael. And so he's going to become, you know, my son. Well, when Ishmael was 13, that's when he was circumcised. And that's when things changed because God had made this covenant of circumcision with Abram at that time. Okay. And then Hagar and their son gets sent away later on, but you'll learn all about that in Genesis. But everyone, every male descendant and servants born in Abraham's house needed to be circumcised. And if not, they were cut off from his people.
You know,
Pardon me?
when a male infant is circumcised, it's just a quick thing. But when you get to take part in a Jewish circumcision, and I did that when I worked in the NICU, it's a ceremony of covenant. It is sacred. And it's one of the most beautiful ceremonies I've ever seen.
Really?
Yeah.
I think that would be interesting. Abraham obeyed the Lord by circumcising all the men in his company that very day. And then we learned a little bit more in day 4, number 4 of your homework. What does Genesis 28:10 through 22 add to this?
All peoples will be blessed through your offspring.
Mm-hmm.
So before it was just your descendants.
Yeah, all families of the earth. All the families of the earth would be blessed. And his land, his people would get the land, right? Jacob made a vow. This is where Jacob had the dream, and he put the stone as a pillar as a reminder of his encounter with God. It's really interesting when you go over to Israel or stuff, there's certain areas that are still sacred to so many people. Like going to Jacob's well is huge to go there, and all the things that you see. So if we were to review some of the elements of these covenants, what do you see in these covenants? Some are God initiated, right? What else do you sort of see?
There's usually a sign.
Yeah, there's usually a sign. You know, you had the Noah, you know, you had the rainbow, Abraham, you had the child, a promise. And there's always promises given in them, are they not? And descendants are always part of the covenants. Then we looked at men's covenants. Wasn't it interesting to look at some of these and you go, What other covenants are in Genesis? What other covenants did you look at?
The covenant between Abraham and Abimelech.
Yeah. What was the basis of that covenant? What prompted it?
Abimelech was really afraid that Abraham was going to kind of take him over, overrun him, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, he was a Philistine king of Gerar. Recognized that Abraham was blessed by God, and he wanted Abraham on his side. So he would like initiated a covenant in which they promised they would not deal falsely with one another, but with kindness. So Abraham gave him sheep and oxen and 7 ewe lambs for a witness, a reminder, and they exchanged oaths. Who else was included in this covenant?
The descendants?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, their offspring would be included. So if you look at the covenant in Genesis 26, which is where he talked, is Isaac, compared with 21, what do you learn? In 26, 23 through 31, the Lord appeared to Isaac. And what did God say to Isaac?
He confirmed the covenant.
Yeah, he confirmed it. So I'm going to carry this through your Abram's descendants, just like I said, right? And then here's him, Bill. He's initiating another covenant with Isaac for the same reason one with Abraham. Isn't that funny? So I said, we have this deal with your father, so we're going to do it with you too. And it was out of fear again, to be sure that Isaac did no harm to Abimelech and his people. And then they had a feast and exchanged oaths. So what are the details of the covenant in 31? This is in day 4, number 4. Who is this with?
Are you talking about Jacob?
Genesis 31. This is on day 4, number 5 question.
Mizpah.
Did I miss something?
Are you talking about Jacob?
Yes, I am. Yeah. Laban initiated covenant with Jacob. What was the basis of this one? This one was built out of fear also, that they promised each other they would not harm one another. And they set up a stone as a pillar and heaped stones for a witness. And they named it Gilead and Mitzvah, which means the watchtower. I thought Mitzvah had a totally different meaning, but it's actually a place. As you see over here, it's a place north of Bethlehem. There's Bethlehem right there. Isn't that interesting? They were to remind each other they're not to do harm to one another. They also ate a meal there. This is the second time a feast or meal is associated with making a covenant. When you go into Exodus 24 and 34, I know this was a lot of information, y'all. So don't feel bad at not being able to connect the points. This is an overview, and we're going to tear this apart during the next 11 weeks, okay? So just hang in there, okay? I'm telling you, it will come and start making more sense. I think this is a lot of information to throw in for the first week myself, but once you learn about this covenant, and if you were in Exodus last semester, the Lord initiated and he brought the slavery out of Egypt. And if you know the story, this happened 400 years after Abraham's promise, okay? And if you compare it to Genesis 15, you can see that they were in a land not theirs. This is when Joseph brought up Jacob and brought him into Egypt, and he took care of them, and they were there for 400 years, and they actually became slaves by that time. They were first there as people of honor, but as new pharaohs come in, they lie. And Joseph died, of course, and all the other sons of Jacob died, the 12 of them. They became slaves. So he would judge that nation and return the land of promise. And Moses was the leader who took the people out of there, okay? Israel is Jacob's rename, okay? He did burnt offerings and sacrifices and were made to the Lord. And Moses took half the blood and sprinkled it on the altar. This is another covenant. It's the sprinkling of blood or blood-initiated covenant. The Book of the Covenant. Does anybody know what the Book of the Covenant is?
10 Commandments.
There you go, the 10 Commandments. That was their agreement with God. And they agreed, all the people of Israel agreed to be obedient. And Moses sprinkled half the blood on the people. He called it the blood of the covenant. Very important, very important. Okay. So here we have, this is a picture of Moses, right?
Yes.
So if you relate this, there were animals that were cut into pieces. And in Leviticus, what we're studying is all this offerings to the Lord, and there's a specific, detail instructions on how to do it, which is basically of how a holy people, can tabernacle with a holy God. But they do the whole covenant thing. The flaming torch passed between the pieces. After making the covenant, the nobles went up the mountain and saw God. And now get this, they say he saw God, and they sat down and ate and drank with him. Would that not be a hoot to do? Go up to God and say, "Oh, let's have dinner." Gosh. Oh, Ben? In Exodus 34, the Lord told Moses to write the words of the covenant, the 10 commandments, and it's another reference to the covenant. So if you look at these elements of these covenants, what do you see? You're going to see sacrifice. You're going to see a feast and eat and drink. That's God initiated. Breaking bread. This covenant was conditional in that Israel agreed to be obedient. And as we all know, that didn't really happen. When we get over to Jesus on day 5, what did you learn from the New Testament passages? Did I lose everybody?
There was eating, drinking.
Still here.
Pardon me?
I'm still here.
What did you learn from the New Testament?
There was a symbol or a sign, and it was the blood, it was the wine and the bread.
Mm-hmm. Who initiated the covenant in Matthew?
Jesus.
There you go. Jesus initiated it. And they had a supper on the night that he was betrayed. He said the bread was symbolic of his body, and they ate it. And he called the cup of wine his blood of the covenant, and they drank it. So you have food and drink, right? His blood of the covenant was poured out for the forgiveness of sins. His blood on the cross, they say that he was totally bled out on the cross. I don't know if you've ever studied that or not, and that's, ugh. But that was to cover our sins. What did you learn in Luke? Just kind of reiterate. What does Jesus say about the new covenant?
He said the new covenant.
Yeah, is in his blood. So how does this relate to you taking the Lord's Supper or communion? You think about this when you have communion?
One of the things that stuck out to me was maybe what's the next question with Isaiah, which goes back to your question, which is that God expanded the covenant for all people when he realized how huge the sacrifice for Christ would be. So that was kind of humbling, I guess, and to think about how trivial we make communion when we should think about that even God said, this sacrifice for my son is too great just for Israel. It needs to be expanded for all people. Sorry, I'm echoing.
Well, actually, I mean, that was God's plan from the get-go, wasn't it? Because Israel was supposed to be priest to all the world, to show the way to God. So with Jesus coming in, he becomes the new covenant to open it up to all people. Everything led up to Jesus. Everything was done to show the way to Jesus, wasn't it? Because he appointed, and that's what Isaiah says, that he appointed his servant Jesus as a covenant to all people.
And
Jesus,
Denise,
yeah,
Jesus, the perfect,
yeah, the perfect sacrifice.
he covenant made that God was man, because he did everything was obedient. So as Israelite, he was able to covenant because he fulfilled the old.
Yes, he fulfilled the old covenant. Yeah, yeah. He was the perfect sacrifice to make a way for all of us to be able to walk up and be before a holy God. I think we forget a lot about holiness, you know, and what we're supposed to be. We're supposed to be priests to the world. We're supposed to be holy. So if you're in covenant with God, what are some of the common ingredients of the covenants? There's always promises and oaths, right? Signs, conditions, meals, sacrifice, name changes. I mean, there's stuff into this, and this is what we're going to be learning through the next weeks, okay? Like I said, I know this is a lot of information. It will get better. But next week, I want to encourage you to continue your study because we're going to get into more closely the custom of the covenants and how each might help with a better understanding of the new covenant. Because that's the ultimate goal, isn't it? Is that we know the new covenant. The DVDs we have for this series of covenant is Wayne Barber's, everybody's favorite. We'll be listening to him in just any minute. Does anybody want to add anything? I know this was real choppy and I apologize for that. Our next class will be better, won't it? Yes, right? Please, right? But Lord, I want to thank you for this time of learning and your wonderful promises to each of us. Help everyone in this class have the time to meditate and glean from your lessons. And most of all, Lord, help us apply these lessons to our lives so that we will be more perfect in understanding you. We love you and long to see you face to face. In Jesus' holy name, amen. Does anybody have anything they want to add? And I apologize. This one was real choppy. Yesterday went so much better, didn't it? Yeah, it did. Today just didn't. You know, some days work and some days don't. I'm going to stop recording here.